Between 2015 and 2024, India's annual dowry-related deaths dropped from over 7,600 down to 5,737. But breaking that total down reveals a different reality. That equates to more than 15 women dying every day, one death every 90 minutes. Recent cases, including the deaths of Twisha Sharma and Deepika Nagar, forced this reality back into the public eye. While these fatal outcomes trigger massive national outrage, they merely represent the extreme terminal edge of a much wider crisis. Beneath the surface of falling mortality rates, the legal apparatus built to address everyday, non-fatal dowry abuse is buckling under its own weight. Success in India's response cannot be measured by a 25% drop in fatalities alone. That single metric obscures a severe structural paralysis choking the legal pipeline. To understand why this pipeline is paralyzed, we have to look at the primary mechanism meant to protect these women, the Dowry Prohibition Act. Its effectiveness is tracked by a specific metric called the pendency rate. This is the percentage of officially registered cases that the legal system fails to resolve by the end of a given year. According to the National Crime Records Bureau, the pendency rate in 2024 hit 37%. While the death toll is technically shrinking, the backlog of unresolved legal disputes remains massive and static. The system is choking. To see why, we have to examine the sheer volume of non-fatal complaints pouring into the courts. Victims are coming forward in record numbers, but the legal system lacks the structural capacity to process and close the reports it receives. We need to look past the 5,700 deaths and focus on a broader legal category: cruelty by husbands and relatives. Looking at this flow, we see the scale of the intake. In 2024 alone, police registered over 120,000 of these cruelty cases. This is not a sudden spike. Over the last decade, this baseline has consistently held above 100,000 cases every single year. Legally, these are heavy files. A cruelty case typically documents prolonged patterns of physical and psychological harassment that require deep legal untangling. When a six-figure volume of complex investigations hits local law enforcement year after year, the intake capacity breaks down immediately. Investigating 5,700 fatal outcomes demands intense forensic resources. However, processing well over 1 million cumulative, ongoing cruelty reports requires an impossible amount of administrative and investigative hours. Because police and prosecutors cannot move quickly enough, a perpetual, immovable backlog forms long before these cases even see the inside of a courtroom. The true burden paralyzing India's legal infrastructure is this unrelenting, high-volume pipeline of sustained, non-fatal abuse. That national figure of 120,000 cases is deceptive, as the pressure is heavily concentrated in specific regions. Uttar Pradesh is a massive outlier, absorbing over 21,000 cruelty cases and 2,000 deaths, a third of the national total. The strain ripples outward. West Bengal, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, and Telangana all log more than 10,000 cruelty cases each. When these localized systems are overrun, disputes frequently escalate into direct fatal violence. West Bengal, for example, recorded 163 explicit dowry murders in 2024 alone. This intense regional concentration of gender-based violence directly fuels the sustained ground-level protests repeatedly erupting in places like Bengal. A national average implies that every regional court shares the load equally. In reality, a few state systems are forced to process 10 to 20 times the volume of their neighbors. Local precincts and regional judges in these high-volume states simply do not possess the mathematical bandwidth or the staffing to hear every complaint. Systemic legal delay is largely driven by localized collapses, where specific hubs of violence completely override their regional legal infrastructure. Eventually, those localized intakes must pass through the final stage of justice, the courts. Watch what happens when that massive volume hits the judicial output valve. The exit is too narrow. Historically, 30 to 40% of cases simply bounce off the bottleneck and remain unresolved. For 2024, that fraction locked in at exactly 37%. For a victim, pending translates to prolonged legal limbo, a devastating financial drain, and continued exposure to an abuser while waiting for a trial date. Despite the strict mandates of the Dowry Prohibition Act, the legal code provides no structural mechanism to force these cases through the constricted output valve any faster. As long as the intake remains above 100,000 complaints annually, that 37% failure rate will compound, creating an ever-expanding snowball of delayed justice. This delay is a strict mathematical certainty. When a static, under-resourced legal infrastructure meets this level of concentrated influx, the system reaches its breaking point. This chart visualizes our two critical data points. Line 1 shows the slight drop in dowry deaths. Line 2 shows the massive, unyielding volume of overall cruelty cases, leaving this massive gap of unresolved backlog. A reduction in extreme, fatal outcomes is no indication that the underlying legal framework is actually working. The true health of this system must be judged by its throughput capacity, its ability to resolve the 120,000 non-fatal abuse complaints filed every year. Without a massive expansion of judicial bandwidth in states like Uttar Pradesh and West Bengal, the Dowry Prohibition Act will continue to act as a bottleneck rather than a shield. Systemic justice cannot be achieved merely by lowering the death toll. It requires transforming the courts from a stagnant holding pattern into an active engine that provides timely closure for hundreds of thousands of survivors.